Live.
Sure.
All right. Are we? Let me know how this comes across, and if we're streaming.
Oh, there we go. That's better.
Heyo, everybody who's joining in. We're just making sure we're up and running, and we'll start in a moment.
Yep, you're here. You're live. I can see you. You exist. You have a voice. People are now looking at you, waiting for you to say something. It makes me think of The Incredibles, where that little neighbor kid's just watching Mr. Incredible do something. He's standing in front of the car. He's like, "What are you looking at?" "Waiting for you to do something incredible." That's what everybody's doing right now, Tyson.
And his response is appropriate, right? You and me both. You and me both.
That's an impressive model. Did you make that model yourself with your own two hands?
Hey, I made this model.
Is it
And what's that?
Does it exist in the real world?
This is a model of the Whistler Library, which is up in Canada. The that little place north of us, and
Mm-hmm.
this model, I found this. I reached out to the architecture firm who designed it, and I asked them for some of the drawings and permission to recreate it, and they gave me permission to do so. I just thought what a really cool design, and yeah. So this is the Whistler Library.
Okay, so this is the perfect segue to say, well, why does he need a pre-existing model if we come here to watch him model stuff? Are you modeling stuff today or what?
Well, it's a good question, my friend. We're not going to do so much modeling today, if none at all. We may set some things up, but today, what the intention is to cover what scenes are, how to use scenes in SketchUp. So it is a different premise than some of the stuff we've done before, and hopefully one that you'll find useful. And if you missed the live modeling, if you're not, Aaron will be back on Friday doing some landscape elements with live components. So, and we'll have plenty more sessions where we do modeling. But this is a little bit of a mix up, and we might mix things up and do something where we just dive into a tool or a topic and kind of explore it in a little bit of depth instead of trying to model something from scratch. So, by all means, tell us you hate it or tell us that's great. And mostly, let us know what questions you have on scenes. So, let Jody know. He'll pass them along. Again, the nature of this live streaming is usually that there's a little bit of a delay, but that we should be able to work with that as needed. Not a problem. We're just going to cover, how to use scenes. I'm going to make my suggestions. Like everything SketchUp, everybody kind of has their own personal workflow that they prefer. So I'll be covering just what I think works best. And you can call out BS if you think so. Jody always calls my BS, so feel free to do
I'm
so.
not gonna I'm not gonna let you just skate along. I want you to be the best person you could be, the
Oh,
best
thanks.
modeler you could be. Hmm.
Nice. I did bring. I was in here. I grabbed this model. I opened it up, and I had Tommy here. This is our good friend Tommy, who's not with the SketchUp team anymore. But um, Jody and I were actually chatting with him recently, and we haven't obviously. We all don't see each other that often over the past year. So I was like, I'll leave Tommy in here among all of the silhouetted people, just because I couldn't bear.
It's
I
not a
couldn't
dense
bear
enough
to let
crowd,
him
but it'd
know.
be it'd be fun to have a nice "Where's Waldo" kind of thing.
Oh, that's a good idea.
See if you can spot your 2D component. That is a popular game among sketchupers is seeing their 2D component in the wild.
It is.
My personal favorite, I turned up in somebody's model of it was like one of the Guardians of the Galaxy scenes. He's like a
Oh
concept artist,
yeah.
Guardians of the Galaxy, and I was totally in that. And my 2D component is just dumb. It's like me barefoot, standing sideways, pointing with my thumb, George Clinton style. Yeah, so yeah, I never see myself, but there I was.
So not terribly epic, but that's pretty nice, Jody. That's nice.
Thanks. Have you ever found yourself in the wild?
You know, the problem with that is is that only components that were made at a certain age that sort of long ago and became part of the default library get distributed out in the wild. So if you didn't exist as a component back in, let's just say 2010, I don't know, then no, you don't show up. And at the time, you know, you and I have been at SketchUp for the same time period, but part of the default library, I wasn't part of the default library, so I'm not out there.
Oh, that's sad.
Oh well.
Okay, people are trying to ask what's happening, so make something happen. I'm
We're
waiting for you to
just-
do something incredible.
Oh man. So let's talk about first. Scenes are these. Now on a Mac and a PC, the UI will be a little different, but not so much. That it's mostly it's just going to be you'll have your side bars on a PC, and on a Mac you have these floating dialogues. Scenes are useful because they're a way to sort of collect a series of settings, and these can include the camera settings, such as we're seeing here, where we could have just elevations, or we could have a perspective view, and we could save that. They're also a way to save things like shadows, and as we'll see, kind of you can turn tags on and off with them, and a number of other things, styles. And they can be used to create presentations, and they can be used just to help facilitate your efficiency in working. And we're going to explore just kind of all of these aspects. So if you're a very seasoned SketchUp user and you're really comfortable with scenes, then just sit back. But if you have used scenes a little bit and then got confused about how to sort of use them with a little more kind of in depth, or had trouble editing them, that's what we're going to go into. So I am going to get rid of the scenes in this model, and with that dialog box, there's scenes here across the top, as we've seen, and then there's our scene dialog box, and it's important to kind of distinguish between these, and we'll be doing that as we move along. So in our dialog box, I'm going to hold the shift key down, and that will allow me to select multiple scenes, and I can just hit delete them. So I'm going to delete all the scenes that I was just casually creating before here. And then when you do this, I'm actually glad this showed up. Sometimes it threw me into a different style than what I was in, because styles can be saved with scenes. So don't be too alarmed if that happens. In this case, I'm going to revert us back to some default style. And let's do just like a really basic overview of creating scenes. This little plus icon, and we have a different properties to save, which you can expand and contract here. In fact, before I do this, I'm going to pick a little bit of a simpler style. But by default, everything's checked. I'm just going to add a scene. And it creates a scene. Then I'm going to navigate to kind of a different point over here, different view of our model, and add a scene. And you may notice that shadows are not on right now, so I'm going to turn shadows on, pick a different viewpoint, and add a scene. And then maybe just to see how it looks, I will change the shadows to a different time of day and add a scene. All right, scene 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we can rename these here, but for now, let's just jump back to any one of these. Because we had everything checked, it's going to remember both the camera location, the style we have, the shadow settings. If I click here, and this is a good point too. So it is not actively showing the shadows as we move. If your model becomes too complex for it to sort of like actively create the shadows, keep up with them. Even as I scrub this, you can see it's pretty jumpy. Then you may not see that. So as we transition from scene 3 to scene 4, it's turning the shadows off until it hits scene 4. Now, I'm guessing that we could maybe see our shadows if we turn the trees and vegetation off. So let's do that now. Let's take scene 3 and scene 4, and I'm selecting them over here. And one of the things that I'm going to turn off from that it remembers is visible tags. So I want to say, don't let me turn things on and off, and don't remember that. And now if I go into, what's that?
You're just jumping right into one of my biggest pain points with scenes, which is just remembering which things to check and not check, and make sure I'm doing the right things whenever I'm updating all my scenes.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because we're going to talk about, like, there is some very understandable confusion when you're editing scenes, and we're gonna talk about that. I'm still sort of just playing around with like some of the things you can do, but because I've selected these two and turned off visible tags, we should be able to turn off, let's say, entourage and roof. And now if I click on scene 3, those stay off because for both of those scenes we turned off tags. So it doesn't remember which tags are on or off. And actually with those trees off, we can see the shadows transitioning. So that's, I think what scenes are is not too hard for people to wrap your heads around. The confusion comes when you create a scene and you think, yeah, I'm in scene 2, or I'm in scene 1, right? And I want to go to scene 1 here, and I want to turn off the camera location and hidden objects or active styles of fog. I want to turn some things off in scene 1, which I think is activated, though some of you will clue into what's going on here and why this is actually not working. So if I go to scene 2 now, okay, this looks good. Let's go back to scene 1. Oh, my attempt to break scenes broke. No, it didn't. If I go to scene 3, remember that's our aerial view, we don't go anywhere. Scene 4, we still do. But for some reason, we broke scene 3. And your
That's
thoughts?
the kind of thing I mutter to myself on a regular basis whenever I have like 5+ scenes.
I know. Here's the thing. Here's the thing that is absolutely confusing. Nobody should feel like, oh, why is this hard to understand? The connection seems obvious between here and here. We've got scenes open. If I click on scene 2 here, it updates here, right? If I click on scene 1, it chooses scene 1. The opposite is not true. If I click on scene 2 here, this scene is still, scene 1 is still highlighted. If I click on scene 3, scene 1 in the tabs is still highlighted. And the confusion comes because it is very easy to intentionally or accidentally select a different scene here in your scene dialog box. And if you edit scene, if you think you're editing scene 1 here and you start making changes, you're editing scene 3. Because this is the one selected in the dialog box, even though in our SketchUp view, we still think scene 1 is active. They are not as connected as first appears. And that's like the first thing when you're editing scenes, that's the major thing to wrap your head around, is that these scenes across the top and the scenes in your dialog box seem like they're connected, directly connected, and they're not. Not in the way that you think they are when you want to edit them. So, is that enough preaching? Does that make sense?
Way to preach. Preach it.
Well, and any questions at this point? Like throw some questions out or
there's a couple questions. Patrick wants you to go over section cuts in scenes because he has problems with that, and then also Bill's wondering about selecting scenes without the moving transition, i.e., an instant change for the animation between. So
great questions. So we're going to cover both of those topics. We're going to work our way down through each of the properties to save and kind of show examples of each. So while we're here, before we go into sections and we'll talk about scene transitions, let's talk about what I recommend is the best way to both create and edit scenes. And that is completely within the dialog box. And you should be very careful that you only, in the SketchUp window, you can use these tabs to activate a scene, but again, sort of mentally break any connection that what you're doing here and what you're doing here. Think of this only as activating scenes. Don't ever think about it as editing. So if we go to scene 1, 2, 3, and 4, I can select all of these, and from this point, if we look down here, we can see there's different properties. It's telling us some are checked, some are giving us kind of an indication that some of them have saved properties and some don't. When you want to update one or multiple scenes, what I suggest is you just do it all right here within this. Now, so if I turn the camera location off, I have just obliterated the camera settings, hopefully for all of my scenes. So if we come up and choose a different view, scene 2, scene 3, scene 4. Good. We obliterated the camera for all of the aspects. What I suggest, let me delete these. So select all these, delete them. And let me turn shadows off again. When you go to create a scene, often, we've taught this, people will often teach you, well, just be aware of what settings you're saving to the scene when you create it. I'm in my corner, my personal recommendation is don't do that. Do not worry about what is saved here when you create your scene. I suggest, oh goodness, I got a weird phone call. I suggest create your scene irregardless of the settings, because if you go changing these settings before you create a scene, you're going to possibly ruin a scene you've already done. So just, it doesn't matter what's saved in here. create your scene. And we'll create multiple scenes. Then, with your scene selected, now I'm going to go in and say, okay, I want my camera location, and I want visible tags, and I don't, it's giving me that warning, scene thumbnails. Scene thumbnails take a few seconds every time. I almost always turn those off. And I want just location and tags. So now scene 1 is there. Got it. Scene 2 over here. Going to add a scene, not worry about whatever I'm saving. And in scene 2, I'm going to select scene 2. I'm going to turn camera location on and off, and I'm going to turn tags on and off. This seems a little excessive, maybe. It's just the most reliable way I've found to always know that you're actually changing the scene you want and not another previous scene. Because again, here scene 3 happens to be selected here, scene 2 is selected here. Let's come up here and say, okay, and scene 3, I'm going to activate it here and then toggle this on and off, on and off. Now, you can do a similar thing by hitting this update button. So if I create a new scene, and then in scene 4, I'm going to hit update, and the properties I want to update are the 2 that I have saved. That works too. If we toggle between scene 3 and scene 4, it has worked. Again, it's a personal preference. That actually typically will work if you're comfortable with your settings. Again, for me, I tend to just, when I create a new scene, I tend to just not worry about the update, and I'll just flick through, turn everything off, and then turn on again what I want. Again, personal preference. Just for me, it's been the most reliable way that I know to update or create scenes. So I hope that makes sense. Now, in our case, let's talk about that question that came up about this transition. If you go up to your model info, there's a tab called animation that has transitions and scene delay. You can also get to this through view animation settings. It's just going to pull up the same exact thing. And here you can turn on or off the scene transitions. So if I toggle that off, now we're going to jump between scenes very quickly. So it's as simple as that. You just turn scene transitions off. Now let me take this time and move it to 2 seconds. And I'm going to take my slide delay time and move that up to 1 second. And let me grab the play button. Where is it?
So we should probably talk about the fact that customizing your toolbar on a Mac is so much different than it is on Windows.
Insanely so. And in fact, just to be sure, view animation play. Okay, so because I don't remember exactly, customizing your toolbar will go into view toolbar tool stuff, and then you can start to customize your tool palettes and your toolbar on Windows. It's an entirely different process than on a Mac, where you right click in a gray area and say customize. So totally different. But if you want, there is a play pause to work through your scenes. So I've got scene transitions set on. If I play, it should 1, 2, 1 second pause, 1, 2, 1 second pause, 1, 2, transition, 1 second pause, 1, 2, transition, 1 second pause. Because again, I've got a 2-second transition time. So I'm going to pause this. And of course, if I set that to something like 5 seconds and this to a 2-second delay, or if you want no delay, there's no toggle for it. You just turn this to 0, your delay time to 0. And then if I hit play again, it's going to do 5 seconds on the current scene and then take 5 seconds to transition. Now, I hope somebody out there is asking, because the very, very reasonable question would be, how do I create custom transition, custom times between each scene? And unfortunately, the answer is you just can't. Not in native SketchUp. It's a universal setting. If I make scene transitions 5 seconds, they're all 5 seconds. If I make them 1 second, they're all 1 second. There are some plugins out there, particularly the animation ones, keyframe animation perhaps, and Fredo's animation, that do allow you to create custom scene transitions between scenes and make it 2 seconds for this transitions and 5 seconds for this one. We're not going to go into that, but just that's one of those things to know about. Okay. Any questions on transitions, scene transitions?
Besides the animation part?
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna make this 3 seconds. Let me show an example of just something to be aware of. Another thing that you don't have control over is how it transitions. But what's that, Jody?
Okay, never mind. Oh, so you probably just answered it, because the question was, can you get it to move along a path?
Man, I wish. No. Nope. The question being, can we control the transition path? Or can we control the camera along a path? And again, that's something that there's some limited control over if you get into the animation plugin, particularly Fredo's animation plugin, which is quite robust. Not in native SketchUp, unfortunately. Here's what you have to keep in mind. So look, let me just sort of, I'm going to be looking towards this corner wall right here. I've got my scenes, and I am going to take scene 3 and turn the camera location off and on, right? Just updated it. And now I'm going to go over here, kind of to this view, looking back almost the opposite direction that from where we were. I'm going to take scene 4 and again flick that camera location toggle on and off to update it. Now if I transition to from scene 3 to scene 4, so this loop, this sort of big loop that it creates, you don't have control over that, but you can at least keep in mind that the smaller kind of change you make in the view, the more at least predictable it will be. Now in this case, for example, if you think of this as kind of like 180 degrees, and we're still on both sides of this 180 degree line, if you were to draw a line between where we're looking, we're still on this side, and so it transitions to this side. If I simply take this view and look away over here, now I'm scene 4, I'm going to toggle it to update it. Whoa, what happened? This is where just be careful about breaking 180 degrees in your view. If you're looking this way and you're looking back this way with a scene and you're a little bit off, you can start getting some really big looping transitions. and you can't even always tell which side it's gonna flip around on. That's an extreme example. I don't think many people do that, but just be aware that from here, if I transition from this scene just simply to this one, if I go to scene 4, toggle camera, this is, I think most of us can kind of understand the path that's going to happen here. So just be aware of that. Mm-hmm.
Can you reorganize which scenes, like the order for the animation? Did you just say
that?
Great
idea.
Away.
That is a great suggestion. So scene 3, scene 4. Oh, and scene 5 was way down here. So let's take scene 5 and move it ahead of scene 3, right? That would, then we're transitioning more naturally. So scene 5, we're not changing the camera, but if I select it here, over here you've got this up and down arrow. So I can go whoop, whoop, and move it up, and it moves it here too, right? If I continue this, you can see it's moving it back and forth in the order. And I'm glad you brought that up, because the order is important. If you export this as an animation, it's going to export it in the order that you have, top down or left right. Doesn't matter what you name them. So scene 5 is now ahead of scene 3. And if we transition,
that actually is a good segue into one of the other. Well, a couple of people now asked about the exporting. So what are your options when you export an animation?
So exporting is a good question. By default, typically this include in animation will be checked. So if we look at scenes, all of the scenes have include in animation, and what that means is if we go to File, Export, Animation, it means all of our scenes are going to be included in this animation. And so we can export as, because this is an animation, we will have a series of JPEGs, PNGs, TIFFs, or in this case, it's just going to be an actual movie file. And in our options, we have some resolutions. Those of you who export images will be familiar with the line scale multiplier. You can make your edges appear thicker or thinner by turning this line scale multiplier up and down. If I hit preview frame size, it should pop up a very simple, got it, frame rate, loop to starting scene. If we, in our case, wanted scene 4 to then loop back to the original one, we could leave that checked. Transparent background, correct me, Jody, but I think that's only an option on Mac. Is that still true?
I think that is.
So, sorry, that's more of an OS thing. That's not something that we built in. That's just taking advantage of OS. We're
leaning on what Apple provides.
Yeah. So I could create a alpha channel that leaves a transparent background, but only on Mac.
Colin's going to check on Windows for us.
Okay.
He's going to confirm.
Now if we go custom, we can turn this up and have a little more. But yeah, this will.
So there's a question. There's a question a little earlier about the hidden geometry checkbox.
Mm-hmm.
Did you talk about that?
No.
Or are you going through each of the checkboxes? Okay.
Yeah, and we haven't even gone there.
Okay. Yeah, there's so many checkboxes to go through.
Okay, so animation is pretty straightforward actually. You export as some kind of movie file. H.264 is a very common compression format. There's there's not a lot of options. I don't believe you have a lot of options for changing the exporting format. Um, but you know, you can certainly convert it. Let me cancel that. And then again, if you have, let's talk a little bit about, like, this is kind of presentation or views. Let's talk about some working scenes and that, and we'll start to get into kind of what the different, these different properties can afford us. So if, let's say scene one, let's name these. Let's actually make this useful. So I'm going to call this one view up the stairs, and this one, and again, make all your changes here. Scene 3, we'll call this view of entrance, and I don't even know if that's true, but okay, so we've got something descriptive. And scene 1 and scene 2, right now we do have camera and these things, but let's change these. Instead of that, I want scene 1 and scene 2 to toggle the roof on and off. So I'm going to take scene 1 and just edit this for a moment. I'm going to turn this include in animation, turn that off. I don't want this to be part of anything that we'd ever export as a movie. This is a working scene. I'm going to turn off camera location, and I'm going to leave all of these others off. And then under tags, this roof assembly.
I feel like the working scene, in air quotes, is something that, I don't know. I don't know if everybody does that, but I've always created, like, if I've started creating scenes, I always create one that doesn't matter what the camera is. I can edit around there. I'm never afraid that I'm going to accidentally like turn off some setting, or, and that way I can work in that one. Or I'll have some that is like a working scene that's no textures. Actually, that even used to be one of our tips, right? If you're trying to get the best performances, have a scene, always keep a scene that doesn't have any of the fancy processor intensive rendering functionality on it, and that way you can always come back to that to make your edits.
Absolutely, it's a great suggestion. So let's create a few of those that that we can combine. So again, in this one, let's just say we're going to turn the roof off and the entourage off, and under scene 1, again, I'm going to turn that off and then turn it back on to record it. And again, this is the same thing basically as if I was updating it here. For me, it feels, I don't know, it feels kind of like I'm just obliterating all the settings and then resetting it to what I want. Whereas updates sometimes I just doesn't quite work. I don't know. It may be my own user error. But on scene 2, yeah, I'm going to turn off include an animation, turn off camera, turn off visible tags. I'm going to turn those back on. And then I'm going to turn visible tags on. So if we test this, it's always good to test this real quick. This toggles these on and off. And it shouldn't matter what view we have, and it shouldn't matter if we've got shadows on, and it shouldn't matter what style we've got. And so we should name this as roof on, entries on, and roof off. 4? I can't. Oh dear.
This is exciting.
Watch. So this is what we call working scenes, because for obvious reasons, you can just toggle certain things on and off really easily. Now, it's one of the things that we introduced, within the last version or so of SketchUp is tag folders. And this makes it a lot easier to use tags to manage multiple things, because before you wouldn't want to have to come in here and turn this and this and this and maybe several other tags on and off each time, and you could save all of those into a scene. So all that to say, tag folders does make this process of managing a little bit easier, but working scenes is still pretty useful.
Eddie said you had it the wrong way around, on off.
Oh, I do? I totally do. Nice.
Look how easy it is to fix. Way to like make a mistake in air quotes just so you can prove your point. Nice. That was subtle. And I'm calling it out. Ugh, why am I such a tool?
Oh, so this is roof on.
So
and this
Barry
one.
was wondering how you might have some geometry in a scene that you don't want to see in other scenes. I guess that's kind of exactly what you're saying, right? With the roof.
Yeah,
Same thing would apply to cars or entourage or people or whatever.
Yeah. Please articulate if it's different than what I'm showing. But this is how you would basically group things and put them on tags, or assign tags to them. And then you turn those tags on and off and save that state to a scene. And let me know if that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think you might have asked that right as you were starting to talk about this other stuff, because I think you covered it very well there.
So same thing, same idea, but let's do the same thing with styles. Now, what did I say before? For me, my preference, I don't try to create a new scene. And I wouldn't go into, if I went into this scene right now and like, I want to create a scene that just saves styles, and I turned off tags and I turned on styles. In fact, I'll do it. I turn on styles and then I add a scene. I think you'll see people recommend that you change your settings and then add a scene. And I don't recommend it, because I just destroyed my last scene. So again, my recommendation, just create a scene. It doesn't matter what settings are showing. Create a scene and then edit it. Just for proof, if I look at my roof off, my roof on, my roof off does nothing, because I thought I was creating a new scene, but really I was destroying a previous one. And you can
That's never happened to me.
I'm calling you out, sir. It has.
Yes, it has.
It happens to all of us. It's so easy to do. It's so easy to do. So now, on my roof off, I need to fix this again. It happens to all of us. It's really easy to do. It sounds like I'm just being really, I don't know, pedantic or repeating myself, but that's why. I don't recommend trying to set your settings and then create a scene. But I think that gets recommended out in the wild. I've seen that recommended, and I think I know why, but I just find it's more reliable. Anyway, so roof off.
You're better off learning to do it with the settings. That way, if you ever do need to make changes to existing scenes or stuff like that later, you're doing it the right way, rather than being like, well, I guess I'll just delete this scene and create a new one.
Mm-hmm.
Which is certainly a way to do it. But
so I could click on these. If I single click, I can just select which one. Roof off. I want to turn style and fogs, visible tags, turn that back on. I fixed my roof off, roof on scene. Now scene 6, let's move this up and edit it. So scene 6, we're not going to worry about tags, but the styles, let's just pick a few styles here. We're going to have a very kind of nice line style. So scene 6, I'm making sure it's selected here, and under style, I'm going to toggle that on and off. And then,
so there's not
There's not.
There's not a way to. Someone was asking about having animated or dynamic component animations in transitions.
I don't know if there's anybody out there who can answer that. I'm not an authority on that. I'm not sure. I don't think it will work. I don't think
That
you can
seems like an
connect
interesting.
scene transitions to. And I could be wrong because the new live components that we have operate a little bit differently. So maybe that is a property that could be, but I'm not aware that you can do that. That sounds awesome, though.
It's a
I
fun,
hope
a
so.
fun maybe question.
I hope
Take it
so.
to take it to the forums.
But nobody has a live component editor yet, so no, I don't want to delete. So scene 6 is line style, and then I'm going to add a scene 7. I'm going to choose a different style, whatever it may be. I'm going to update it, even though it probably was, but I just like doing that. Redundancy. Color style. So I hope at this point kind of the idea of how to create working scenes makes sense, that you're just saving one or two or a few settings down here. And now line style, color style, roof on with line style, view of entrance with color style, with the roof off. It's just so quick to set these things up. Now, I don't want to say a lot of people, there are some people who are very actually kind of creative with this, because you can take this type of thing and you can set up certain tags in your model and scenes in your model and go up and save this as a template. And then you can sort of drop in a model and have some of this pre-built, and then you may need to do a little bit of connection or fine tuning, but you can actually have a lot of these things that already are going to work. So again, just in building in that efficiency, it can be helpful.
So Nathan is got a question, a good one here. He's not going to like the answer.
Sorry.
He has 30 animation scenes already set up, and he's added an object on a new tag that he doesn't want to appear in those scenes.
Mm-hmm.
How can he update them all at once instead of going through and updating each one?
Okay, so let's see if I can understand what's going on here. So he has something set up already. He's got a whole ton of scenes, probably a bunch of views, probably a bunch of stuff that he wants. And he wants to, and he's brought in a new group or component, set it on its own tag, but now it's showing up in all of them, and he wants to update all of them so it's gone, right?
Right.
But he wants to preserve the tag behavior he already saved.
Right. All he wants to do is hide that one new thing.
Okay, so if you have already saved all of these settings, especially your tags, you'd have to update them, and doing so may destroy some of the tags. Now, if you don't have a series of tags saved just on your first 10 and a different series of tags saved just on your second, then you can. If I bring in this, if I take this power couple here and I make them a new tag, Uh, um, and I'm going to take and move them out of my roof assembly. Where's my... So these are going to go into this one. So this is going to depend now on what we have saved on the other ones. If we look at roof on, roof off, because we have this stuff saved in here, and if we had lots of tags or lots of scenes with varying tags, then unfortunately you're going to have to go through and kind of manually configure each one. If all of your tags are on, and I can just say, grab these two in my, let's see.
So Colin says he thinks he found a way. He says you can select multiple scenes and uncheck and then check the hidden objects.
And I think what he's suggesting is that you can get around this because you can do hidden objects and have the same effect as tags, and I agree, but you're going to run into the same problem as far as it depends on what you've set up previously. If you have hidden objects, right, again, so I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but if you have 30 scenes and each scene has kind of a unique combination of tags on and off, and the same would apply to if you have hidden objects on and off in different scenes, then you still are going to have to go through and kind of custom and go through the time it takes to make sure each one's correct, because this is a universal setting. As soon as I turn the visible tags and I want to turn this power couple off, and I want to update this one, I can update all. I can go in here, select multiple, but this is kind of a warning that says if I want to update my tags to everything on but the power couple, I'm going to lose that roof off behavior that I created. I think I'm belaboring this. The point is, if you've done a complicated setup, you got to go through and kind of tweak each one individually. If you've, like Colin has suggested, if you've only done tags, you could go through and say, let me turn this back on. I'm going to select these two back here, and I'm going to turn them, not off, I'm going to hide them. Okay, so I'm going to hide them and say I want to select everything here, and then I'm going to toggle on hidden objects. It should be the case that they're hidden in all of our scenes. Because we hadn't used that before. So that, again, that'll work unless you've used it before. But I think, as you were alluding to, Jody, if you have used, some semblance of combinations of tags, hidden geometry, hidden objects, you better go in and make sure you're doing it to each one.
It feels like you need to have like a 4-dimensional outliner that lets you drag and drop and add things to this, but not that. And maybe it's just magic. Maybe you just need magic.
Well, maybe. Yeah, no, at some point it gets a little tricky if you've created some stuff, and then when you add to the model. I think that's a good segue actually to the question earlier about section cuts, because section cuts have a couple of states that can get tricky as well in how they're viewed. So let's look at that.
I feel
Unless there
like you
were,
could just say that about like all things scenes. This this thing can get pretty tricky. Here's the thing that well, I mean, this is a different topic, but what always happens to me is as I'm creating scenes, I'm constantly being prompted to create a new style. Like, okay, sure.
yeah. Um, Real quick, since you brought that up,
Mm.
if I take this style, and this was our color style, but if I take a new style and I change just one aspect of it, if it's not saved, and I go over here and I want to create a new scene. Oh, I probably have this turned off. Anyway, like Jody says, you'll often get a warning about something that saves a style because it's saying that style is the style's up in the air. Basically, you haven't saved it. It's still kind of, and if you saved this model, exited, but didn't save the style, next time you come back, it's going to be revert back to whatever changes you hadn't saved. Things like that. Won't belabor that point, but yeah. If you're comfortable editing your styles, just turn that you can turn that dialog box off permanently and just say, don't warn me about this. I got it. The thing about section cuts that gets tricky is these the settings up here where you can have a section cut but the section cut plane is off, where you can have the plane on but the section cut off, and where you can have sort of this poche.
Nice fancy word.
Yeah, well, this is what trips me up because whether a tag is on or off or a tag group seems pretty straightforward to me. A section, if you save a section down here, so if we look at active section planes, this section stuff is saved in the style, and you're updating. So it just be aware that it can be a little confusing because this stuff relates to both style and section, but you may only be saving a section plane. So then when you come back to it, it may look different because you're using a different style. There's a little bit of overlap that can be confusing. Just be aware of it. But there's something you can do with sections that is really cool. I'm going to turn off the roof and the stuff. And again, so over here, let's add, oh, we already did. I've got scene 8. I'll just use that one. I'm going to turn off the style, turn off hidden objects, and I'm going to move this section cut, let's say, to here. And I'm going to toggle active section plane. Now, unlike other things, even if you use some of the animation plugins, you'll actually be moving an object. In this case, we're going to animate this section cut, but you don't move the section cut. In this case, you're just going to transition from one section cut to another. So to animate a section cut, we need to create at least 2 section cuts. So if I create a second one here, I'm going to create a new scene. So I've got scene 9. I'm going to toggle this on and off just to be sure. And now between scene 8 and scene 9, we have this cool transition. And I'm going to turn the section planes off. And let me rename these so that we don't forget what they are.
So fancy.
It's so fun. And I'm going to move that up. And again, we didn't save anything else with this, so we can come in, choose a different view, and run with that. Or, since Jody, thinks we're being fancy, let's get fancy. Section 2, we're going to do this and add our current camera location. So, and I almost made a mistake there. I was looking up here. I still do it. But section 2, it is selected in our scenes. We updated the correct one. Section 1. Let's see if we can create a camera that sort of maps to our section a little bit. I'm going to change it a little bit, but we're going to be here. I'm going to choose section 1, toggle camera location, see what we got. Boom. That's fun. I think that camera view is kind of distracting. I'm going to make it more straight.
So if you are exporting this to an animation, it's just going to remember, it's going to go off of what your previous scene camera angle was set to, right? I mean, you could be on section 1, orbit the camera around, and then click section 2 and get the animation, but when you go to export, it's going to be whatever was in the colors defined on the color styles scene.
I'm not sure.
Section 1. Does section 1 have camera defined, or does the scene titled
Section 1 we did define a camera. We had to do that to create this transition. And if we wanted to export it, it's a good reminder. See how we've got those parentheses?
Yeah, that's what they're called.
On section 1 and section 2.
Aaron doesn't math. Tyson doesn't English.
I don't do anything above 4th grade level.
Nice.
That's probably below 4th grade. Anyway, let's grab these two and make sure we include them in the animation, because if we exported this, we wouldn't see it. But now it's part of the animation. And again, that parentheses is your visual designator of what's in or out of this. So that, any questions on that? Like, as far as that goes, again, you need 2 sections. You're transitioning it, and each section is, on a different scene. So you have to have at least 2, and then it's just gonna be mapped to whatever your time is, like we saw before. So if we wanted to make this a little nice and slow, we could turn up our transition. It doesn't seem 9 seconds. There we go.
So a little while ago, Barry asked if you could import and export scenes between SketchUp files.
Not natively, but yes, with extensions. I know there's extensions that do it. I'm not going to show it because I haven't done that in so long that I don't want to fumble around. But yes, the answer is if you go out and find some extensions, there are, I think, a few that will save scenes from one model to another.
It's pretty cool that the API is open enough that people can create extensions that extend the functionality of scenes like that.
It's very cool. I think, based on my rudimentary understanding of it, you should be a little bit wary of what gets saved, right? Camera location is, it understands it based on the global axis. You can save a camera and a scene, but some of the other things don't translate because again you might be referencing tags that don't exist in another model or section cuts that don't exist. So yeah, just be aware of whatever your own model is going to throw at it. Better turn this back down.
Now, if you have a regular set of scenes that matter, then you can define, or you could create a template and always open a template that has a bunch of scenes in it.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be one of those cases where then it's important to know how to use the properties to save checkboxes.
Mm-hmm.
So it got asked again. You didn't actually look into, or you didn't really dig into the top level hidden geometry checkbox yet, right?
Oh, okay, that's fair. I can honestly admit I'm a little bit avoiding that. Here's the thing. here's my...
that was new. It was new in 2019 or 2020.
Yes.
Somewhere in the middle of 2020, I think.
I gotta be careful. I'm stumbling over my words because yes, as Jody says, we introduced the difference between top level hidden geometry and hidden objects in a recent version of SketchUp. And let me turn sections off here. The difference of that being like I could take this this geometry, it's not grouped per se, I could hide it, just keyboard shortcut for me H, and I could unhide it, and that's going to unhide all, which included our power couple back here. If I group this, I can still hide it, but depending on if the visibility mode I choose, so for me now this is hidden geometry, it shows this, and this gets a little bit into stuff that I'm honestly not very good at, but there's a difference between hidden geometry and hidden objects, and you can toggle between them. My suggestion is if you're going to mess with that, do a much better naming of your groups and components than I do, and use Outliner to help you manage what's visible. The problem that we had in the past is that hidden geometry and hidden objects were just one thing. They were just hidden geometry, and it counted as both. But there was not any really good way to manage that, and so it could be useful for scenes because you could hide something and save it as a scene. And that was kind of another way besides, layers in the past, tags, to hide and reveal things, but there wasn't a good way to manage that like the tag manager. So I didn't recommend people used it that frequently. Now that you have the ability to hide geometry or objects, and you can sort of use Outliner to help me manage that, I think it's viable. I am just owning up that I haven't played with it that much. But by all means, you can hide geometry, which tends to be sort of loose geometry, and you can hide objects, which are groups and components.
It basically, it's a big part of just tying everything into Outliner and tags. Like, it's becoming this little perfect storm of visibility and model management stuff.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, and I'm not going to I tend to think probably lean on tags more heavily. I think they're just a more simple idea, but by all means, I'm sure there's some really robust, pretty cool uses of this that I haven't explored. So I hope that makes sense, and I apologize that I'm, cowardly, not going to dive deep into it or show many examples. But yeah,
So there was,
again.
So
Outliner. Use outliner. What's that?
there's a different request to see multiple active section cuts when you're doing the scene transition like that. It's crossing this way and that way. I've seen some amazing ones that actually were really cool like that. But
It is possible. All right, here we go. If we get way lost, I'm blaming whoever asked that. It's a great question. I'm not blaming you. I was chickening out. It's a great question. It is possible. It's just another sort of sub level of complexity that we have to play with. So here's the thing, and probably whoever asked this question knows this and is, I think, teasing us. You can only have one section active in context. I'm not going to do it on this whole model. Let me do it on something smaller. Let's see, do I have anything in my... Let's do this. This will be simple. All right. Here's a little toy tractor that so I'm gonna delete that and ungroup. If we wanted to create a section cut that was working, the multiple section cuts that were happening at the same time on this, we would need to create different groups and embed the section cuts inside those groups. Now, if we wanted to do the whole tractor, that essentially means we'd kind of need two groups on top of each other. So if I group this, I'll show you what I mean. If we put a section cut on the outside of both of these, it should cut through both of them. Okay. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to edit one of these groups and put a section cut inside just one of them. And
what kind of tractor is that?
It's based on, I think, some Ford. It's a Ford something or other. I don't remember. But I modeled it because it's a simplified version that I hope to build out of wood someday. But yeah.
Full scale.
I have a different thought on that idea, but no.
I'm distracting you.
Jody. So anyway, like we said before, I'm going to get rid of whatever scenes I have in here. And again, it sort of threw me, by doing that, it threw me out. Let me just say, okay, where are we? It turned certain tags off. So if you toss all your scenes, just expect to reorient your view. Okay. So I'm going to add a scene. Again, I don't, it's the first one. It won't matter as much, but I'm just going to add a scene and then turn everything off. Except for active section planes. Then I'm going to add another section plane. Where are we here? Add a scene. Now this one should be correct, but I like to just be sure. So let's test this. Scene 1 and scene 2. I'm going to turn shadows off. It'll help us run a little faster. Okay. So that's set up. If we want to do the same thing, we can set up Let's set up a scene here. Oh, I don't know why I'm getting spinning ball of death. Okay, now I got to be careful. So I could add scene 3 and scene 4, but now we've got, scene 1, scene 2, and then scene 3 and 4, and we want both of them to happen at the same time. So I have to be a little bit careful and think, okay, scene 1 is what I want to update because that's where I hadn't cut through the tractor yet, right? So scene 1, I'm going to update scene 1. And I want to... Oh, you know what? There may be somebody out there who's laughing. I'm not even sure if I'm doing this in a way that's possible.
Well, I was laughing, but it was for a different reason.
Okay.
Sorry.
I
I wasn't
think
really laughing. I was laughing with you?
I appreciate that.
Maybe?
So, scene 1, or the section plane should be active in that group. If I update scene 1, I'm going to activate this just to be sure. So, I'm in this group, scene 1, active section planes. I'm going to toggle this on and off. Now, scene 2, if we click on it, good. We've still got this one going. And we're going to add one more scene. Or, I'm sorry, section plane. Maybe we'll just cut halfway through and let the rest of it... I mean, this is going to kind of act a little weird. It's going to... Again, we've got 2 models, so we're going to have... This is not exactly going to work the way that we might think. But anyway, it is possible to create multiple section cuts happening at the same time. Is essentially what we're trying to show. So I've got this one. I've got scene 2. I'm going to turn that on and off. Okay, let's see what we got. That one's funny that it starts up so high. But if we take and now move these together on top of each other and turn those off, let's see what happens. Our timing is kind of bad to get the effect. It's working. Let's tweak our timing.
Important part.
Yeah. Okay, scene 1. This may be why I didn't do this. Didn't volunteer to do this. I'm still a little bit confused as to why it's starting so high. This should be...
Do you have some hidden geometry up there?
Maybe. But it shouldn't matter for where this is placed.
Yeah.
Active. Alright. That's better. Okay.
Trippy.
I'm not... Yeah, trippy. It's probably the best. Okay. It's possible. I'm not suggesting this is a great example, but the point being, if you want multiple section cuts happening simultaneously, you have to embed them in their own groups. In our case, we could cut a scene, cut a section, say, through the roof differently than through the walls, differently than through the ground, and or we can have them happening different ways. But I hope that answers the question and gives some sort of things to play around with.
Pretty fun. So
Yeah.
JP was asking if you have some tips on like how you might present to someone just a house model. So say if you had clients, say you had this building and you wanted to present this to somebody, how would you, using scenes in this, what you've got here, how would you go about presenting something like this? It doesn't have to be a full, graduate level presentation. Just kind of some ideas or some tips for how you use scenes for presentation.
Well, honestly, I would do just the stuff we've done as far as if you have a house like this, I would first create some just utilitarian scenes such as what's the first floor? Let's just explore the first floor and be able to just toggle through scenes that and the second floor or the vegetation on and off. As opposed to, well, let's see. So if we jump down here and we start walking around. So if we're walking with somebody and collision detection is on, so I'm going to turn that off so I can walk through walls. So then
it's fun that you mentioned that actually, because I don't remember who it was that asked a while ago about those three icons right there. They called that one next to it the rocket.
Oh, nice.
So you can explain what you're using there too, just
okay,
since you're there.
But I think it would be most useful as you're walking around to be able to say, I want to, and you could do this through scenes or you could just do this through tags where you're saying, right now I want to, toggle these bookcases off and I want to toggle people off. And then just keep walking around. To me, that would be most useful is just a quick way without dragging your client through the UI. It just makes for a quick way to turn things on and off in anticipation of let's look at, what the views are and some things about this corner as we're walking around so that we don't have to have all this stuff tied into navigation. And then, of course, having a few key views saved as well of like, yeah, hey, this is our entrance view and I have a view saved here because your house overlooks a lake and you want to show how it's going to be amazing. So you've got that saved. So all of the things that we've got, as much as you can anticipate, hey, when I'm sitting down with the client, some of these are going to be views that I want to highlight. And so I'm going to save cameras. Some of these are going to be just turning things on and off so I can really quickly say when they're like, okay, but what if we want that? The other thing, actually, is because we could have things on tags, if I had this model and we're doing a material study, I could have this whole wall assembly painted with a different material or 5 different materials and put each on its own tag, and then I can be like, okay, let's talk about a few material options because are we going to have, are these concrete pillars or are these something else or rough stone? Are we using this type of light wood here or are we using a darker stain? So I don't know. Do you have other ideas, Jody?
No, I don't ever present anything. I just look at it.
Yeah. Um,
I mean, I think probably it comes back to the whole telling thing, right? Is have your scene set up so that they're telling a story about what you're working on.
yeah. One thing that just personally keep in mind, if you really want to create sort of fly through and fly around views, so you can create all these scenes and export them as an animation that you share with your client, and they may be blown away by just that. But you do have to keep in mind, you know, that when I export this, it is going to, even if I turn my transition between scenes to 0, it's going to come to here, and then it's going to start again, and it's going to start again. It is not going to be a fluid fly through. To do that, you got to go out and render it out, or go to Enscape, or go to one of these other programs where you can really get that control over the fluidity of a fly through. So I don't think that's a deal killer. I just think always be aware that you're not going to get a really nice fly through. Now you can, like what we're doing here, and let me come back to these tools that we were talking about. This rocket, as it's called, this position camera, if I click on that, anywhere I click, it is going to put my view right there at a default eye height of 5'6" high. So if I click up here, it puts me 5'6" feet above that landing, not 5'6" relative to the axis or the global axis. It's above that landing. If I come back and click on the roof, it sticks me up here on the roof. But this is really handy because, yeah, we can come down here and say, I'm going to click here. It's going to put me there. And then it automatically puts you into the look around tool, which is exactly what it says. You just click and drag, and you stay stationary. So instead of the orbit tool or pan tool, which is a little bit, you know, your camera's moving somewhere. In this case, you can just look purely from here. And then the final one in this case was these 2 feet, which is the walk around tool. You just click and drag your mouse backwards and forwards and side to side, and you get a sort of a video game like walking tool.
What if you've got a 3D Connection space mouse?
Well, if you're fancy like Aaron, then you're fancy like Aaron. If you have a 3D space mouse and you're good with it, you can just fly through very smoothly on your own. They're
No need
really
for these
cool.
fancy buttons.
But yeah, this walk around tool, it has collision detection. Watch as I walk up the stairs. It's going to go dink, dink, dink. So you can walk up and down stairs. If I try to walk through this door, it will prevent me from doing so. There are modifier keys down here. So if I hold shift, it just moves my camera up and down. So I can like change my eye height. If I hold, for me it's option. Again, on Windows, these keys, just look down here at what your tags are. I hold option, it's run mode, right? So if you want to get somewhere quickly, but it can be disorienting. And the final one is you can toggle that collision detection on and off. So if I'm walking up here, collision is on, I walk up the stairs, but then I'm holding, for me, command, which lets me walk through all these walls, which otherwise it would be stopping me.
That way you know what it's like to be a human versus a ghost touring the facility.
Yeah, it's totally a valid point. If you are presenting to a family of ghosts, you may want to just walk around without collision detection. Solid point, Jody.
I'm just trying to be inclusive.
Well played.
Looking back here for any other questions. Do you feel like you've hit all of those checkboxes in the properties to save?
Section plane shot. I'll show axis just to show it. Let's see here. Let me get a am going to go to my line style, and I'm going to export. Oh, let me turn my sections off. So if I export this out, I'm going to export this as an image. Nice big image. And then I am going to, got it here. So let's say you've got a CAD file or a drawing that you are modeling from. Now, first thing I would do is scale this correctly. I'm not going to bother doing so here because I just want to show one aspect of what we can do. As we're modeling on this one, this is a good example because it has a lot of angles that are not right angles. So we might take our axis, and I'm going to take our scenes here, add a scene, and then I'm going to turn off everything. And this is going to be default axis, and default axis, I'm going to turn axis location on. Now I'm going to right click on our axis or go over here to the axis tool to change this, and I would probably zoom in to get this a little more accurate, but we've got this axis changed. And remember, what this does is this changes sort of the nature of the tools we use and how easy it is to draw along the axis, rectangle, line, and inference locking. So it can be really handy when you're tracing. So I'm going to add another scene. I'm going to make sure to toggle this on and off. Call it something useless like axis 2 that doesn't mean anything. But that's the point, is now I've got this one, and I'll add one more. So now from any view we're in, we can quickly toggle between the axis location, which, as we've mentioned, toggles between how your drawing tools work. So when you bring in, and like I say, this works really well for CAD files too. So if you're importing CAD files or a drawing and you have things that are off axis, this is a really nice, again, working scene that will come in handy. Just set this up from the beginning, and then you can quickly toggle between them as you're drawing. So, yeah.
Do you have a guess what size that sketch file was?
The one that I had,
This one.
this file, last I checked, it was in the 10 megabyte range. I think a lot of that is in, or at least some of that's in the material. Some of that's in the material, some of that's because I brought some stuff in from the warehouse and I didn't particularly clean it up first. So, I don't know. It's not huge. I don't have, there's supposed to be a lot of trees back here. I don't have those in this model. The one other thing I thought we could show, we've already shown, but I'm happy to walk through it if we want. There's, it's the same idea. If you do modeling, let's say of objects or something. So Aaron did Star Wars. back on May 4th. If I were to model, let's say an A-wing, I've got this. We could set this up in a way that really easily gets us our side views, our top views, that turns our reference image on and off, and using, again, what most of us refer to as the Dave technique, where you have something smaller and then something much larger. We could create scenes when we want to toggle between what the actual size is versus what the large size is that we use sometimes to create tiny details. I don't know. What do you think, Jody? Anybody want to see us go through that setup? Or is everybody kind of saturated? Because we've covered all of what we'll do to set it up, but we can do it all the same.
We'll let everyone chime in.
Everyone
presuming
chime
they're
in.
all expected to do so.
Or
It is
any
probably
other
worth mentioning.
questions.
Well, and while we're waiting for either of those two, it's worth mentioning that we are actually we're consolidating all video stuff to the YouTube. And so starting in June, we will no longer have a Facebook or Twitch stream of this stuff. It'll only be on YouTube. So if you're already on YouTube, it doesn't affect you. But if you're watching on Facebook, you might start watching. You might have to open up YouTube at some point to be able to watch this.
I'm glad you remembered to bring that up. So yeah, I think next week. When are we? Like one more week.
It's not till June.
Yeah,
So
on
we've
3
got this
platforms.
week and next week, and then.
And
right now we're. Go ahead.
I think you like. There's I'm sure there's a few people who may not, but essentially by consolidating, hopefully it makes the chat and the engagement simpler and more direct. And again, especially with something like this, where we're actually asking for feedback real time, hopefully it facilitates that a little better. Certainly got the most views and engagement on YouTube, which is why we settled on that. But it is a hopeful attempt to, again, consolidate a little more and make the engagement just one place.
Okay, you have 2 votes to go ahead and show the setup process. So that's it.
That's it. All right. Well, and for anybody who wants to bail out as we set this up, just again, Friday, Aaron's going to be back and he's going to be using some live components again. So there's new live components coming out on a semi-regular basis, and he's going to set up some landscape stuff with that. So check that out. We'll be on all platforms on Friday and next. I don't know if we have something next week, but anyway. So we have something on Friday. All right, then let's set this up.
Do it.
So we're going to take this. I'm going to have a good midpoint, but I'm going to create one. So I'm going to group that line, and this one, we do have a nice line for a midpoint here. So I'm going to grab this, group it. I accidentally grouped too much. So I'm going to move this over so that it's lined up here. And we, obviously bring in some more images, but so let's say one thing that just personally, I'll show a quick example of this. in an example like this, we're not necessarily talking about modeling this. We're not going to model it. You can bring an image in and you can explode the image and map it on as a texture. And in fact, to show this, let me show the difference of what happens if you do that. So I'm going to ungroup this from that line, and I'm going to take this image and explode it. And that will make it's now a texture. So let me undo that. If I explode it, it's a texture. It's a texture that I could apply to other surfaces. I mention that because when I want to reference a model like this, reference an image, I do not explode the reference image. I leave it as it is. I group it. I usually will lock it. And the reason for that is because of how well, let me, if I had exploded it, when I'm in here, see how I edit this group and that disappears? Textures can go away as you dig inside your groups and components. And for us, we want this texture obviously to stay here so we can reference it. So just quick side note, as we set this up, that if you are ever doing something like this, I suggest you don't explode your reference images, bring them in, and leave them as unexploded images. Do group them, because if you bring it in just as the image file, it doesn't behave as a group yet. So that's why it's helpful. Draw a little line, group it, and now you can assign it to tags.
Bill's asked if you could redo the texture thing because he had a sneezing fit right as you did it. Lost all the best parts.
I'm sorry, Bill. Bless you. What I was suggesting, so in this case, you can import directly or you can just drag an image in, right? When you drag in a reference image, if I take this reference image, where's the entity info? Typically, especially for textures, you might bring in an image and then you'd explode it because you want it as a texture that you could apply to stuff in your model. If you want to use it just as a reference though, my suggestion is that you don't do that. And again, the reason being, if I apply this texture and then I'm over here starting to model this A-wing and I group it and then I start editing it, if this disappears, these textures disappear. So your reference would disappear if these were exploded. They're not, and that's why they still show up. That said, I do typically, I group them. And sometimes you need to draw just a single line or something to group it with. But I hope that makes sense. That's just a personal kind of preference of, you can maintain your textures if you don't explode them when you're editing your groups and components. And that doesn't tend to be the case if they're applied as textures. All right, let's see. We were going to set up some scenes. So I'm going to take, this is my front view, this is my top view, and I'm going to, these are untagged, they are grouped, and I'm going to create some tags so that we can use some scenes to control them. So tag 1 is going to be top view. This will be front view. And let's see if this works. I think this will work.
Patrick wants to know if you can crop a reference image.
crop a reference image. Well, now, now that gets into the downside of what I was suggesting, because we haven't applied this to geometry. No, we have to leave this as is. So I think, please correct me if you found
I'd
otherwise.
love to correct you,
I know,
but I don't.
and you
I don't. But I don't know how.
often do. I think you have to maintain the image as you brought it in, and that's, I suppose, if you were to say the downside of what I'm suggesting. Because yeah, it would be lovely to crop this out to just what you need, right? So in scenes, we're gonna let's add a few scenes, and before we add them, I'm just gonna turn stuff off. So let's add 3 scenes. Scene 1 is we turn our front view. Oh, we haven't associated these yet. So this one is going to be top view. This one is going to be front view. And then we should Are these not in here? Okay, once these are in here, we should be able to turn them both off. This. So, scene 1. This top view off. Front view off. And this one will be all references off.
So, was pointed out you could explode the image and then crop it and then make it a group again. Or was suggested by Cohen on Facebook.
But again, if you explode it, you're making it a texture. Yeah, you can. If we explode this, it becomes geometry. You could crop it. But that same thing happens once we edit it. That's gone. Once we're in here editing. So if it's one of these things that it bugs you, change your image outside of SketchUp, or set your stuff up at we could easily export these out as images and then bring them back in. Lots of workarounds. I think you have to preserve this for the purpose I'm talking about. Let's add one more. So top view off. Top view off. We want to enable visible tags. Okay. I'm going to turn off, by default, I think this is one of those things you may be able to save in a template. So my template probably has scene thumbnails on. I never use scene thumbnails, so I want to turn those off. And now that I've created a few scenes, I have to go through and do that, or it's going to keep trying to add them. All right, that should be better. I like scene thumbnails. They're annoying to generate. All right, top view off. That one's on. Okay, front view off. Let's turn top on. Aha! See, I had this selected. I screwed it up. I suppose if I redo this anyway. So let me be careful here. Front view off. Front view off. Top view off, front view off. Or we could simply say, this could just be front view, top view only, front view only, top view only. That'd probably be better naming. Reference off is we were just going to turn all of these off. And then reference on is to turn them all on. All right, let's, okay. That's working. So let's create, let's just have a generic in fact, let's make this a component just for now. And we are going to create a view that's kind of like this, just sort of a side view. We'll call it our basic modeling view, where we can all just sort of jump back out to what our model is. So let's add a scene, and this one we are going to turn off visible tags, but we're going to turn on the camera location. And we could come back, tweak this as much later if we need, but scene 5 is basic modeling view. And then again, for those of you who are familiar, what many of us call the Dave method, when you get into tiny details in SketchUp, some of the tools tend to not work very well. So one of the methods is you can, I've got this is a component. One of the methods you can use is to make a copy of a component. If you scale the outer shell of this component, so if I scale this to say 50, now it's much bigger. But if I edit this, I don't know if you can see it down here, but it's still making changes. So I can make changes on the bigger version. So in this case, all I'm doing is I'm saying, let's set up a scene here that is going to be our scale. And so we can make changes here when we need to, and then jump back down here. Now, obviously, we better let's turn off those scene transitions. We don't want those. Now we can just jump quickly back and forth and make a reference, and we're going to bring this up to here, and we're going to bring this over to here somewhere, and then we're going to jump back to this one because we're getting into detail. So this may not be this may not be something that you need to do, or it may be overkill for some stuff, but could be useful. And again, set this up once and then save it as a template. And then when you come in here with your different view, we'll just bring in whatever, this is still an A-wing image, but we could take this, group it, assign that group to the same tags that I had, front and side, and then all of a sudden I've kind of just got this ready to go easily, right? So I think the other thing that we could set up is a simplified modeling style. And Eric, who's our expert at landscape and who works on campus videos with me, that was a big thing for him. Like he definitely has simplified styles where shadows are off, and it records all this. So you turn shadows off, you have a simple style, you turn your entourage off. Because when you're working on really big models, you need to be able to move around, and then you save some scenes where you turn that stuff back on. But for a model like this, it may or may not be something you need to do. I think that's kind of that. All that, yeah, all that was there. I say if I take this and just assign it to the front view, then we've got it set up.
So, one question here, I guess, before we completely wrap it up is, Pam, civil engineer, said he has a multi-story building apartment, and he set scenes with tags for visibility for different stories. He wants to know if he can save it as a template to use for different apartments. Talk about how, like, did you really dig into, or when you were talking about earlier about making templates, did you have any tips if someone's going to try and do that?
I guess it depends completely on if your tag naming is the same. But you know what? We can do a real quick test here. All right, so I'm going to name these, but this is going to be tag 1. Can't scroll with the... Tag 2 is... and to be sure, is this what you think? This the question is, can we do some stuff and
Create
then
a template for.
Yeah, create a template. So should be, that's all set up correctly. So we've got tag 5, we'll associate with scene 5. Okay. Turn off thumbnails. I need to remember to put that into my template. I don't want scene thumbnails. Okay, so scene 5. Scene 4 is that one. See, it's still doing it. I'm there with it. Scene 3. That one. Scene 2. Update it. And scene 1. Update it. Okay. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Why do you toggle all the properties off?
Again, it depends on what you're trying to do, but I'm envisioning these as utilitarian things where you're just turning certain things on and off, and you don't want to have certain views saved or certain things saved. So I'm just saving the tags. By all means, turn more properties on if you want. I turned them off before I created these so that I wouldn't have to do it with each one. It's just a little time saver, right? If I created a new scene and everything is on, and then I create more scenes, but in scene 8 I only want to affect the style, I've got to go turn these off. Now that only takes a few seconds, but it's just, in scene 7 I got to go. So I turn them off by default, and then I tend to just turn back what I want. Let me delete those. So the question was, if we So if we save this as a template, and now let's create a new from template. Where'd it go? My templates. Scene test. Well, and now I've got this stuff saved in here too. So, okay. Let me go back. Let me turn these all on. And we're going to actually delete this geometry. We still have this stuff set up, so it's associated, but we're going to save this as a template.
Will this work well to also then make construction documents, or is that a different thing to have in mind while you're doing this?
Similar idea, I think, if I understand what you're asking. Scene test 2. But in this case, if we're bringing in geometry, I hope this is what the question was referencing.
Right? Said you were on the right path a little bit ago. So,
but you've got pieces that are separated, and we'll just do this. Let's just do 1, 2, 3. So this one is going to be on tag 3, and this one is on tag 1. I have to jump between my tablet and the mouse because this doesn't have a nice scroll bar. Anyway, that's here nor there.
See, that's why I don't do tablets.
Well,
also I don't own a tablet, and also how I get confused.
Okay, so I hope this is what the question was, which is, depending on what you're trying to do, yeah, you could set some stuff up as a template with certain tags associated with certain scenes pre-hand, and then when you start a new model or bring stuff in, you just need to then assign some tags that are already created, and now you've got a nice association already built in. I hope that was the question. I think, to your point, Jody, where you're talking about documentation, this is one of those things I think that certain people like Matt Donnelly and Nick Sonder do, where he creates a template that does have some of this stuff built in already, and he'll start building. It's just a way to sort of jumpstart your process, and you can bring certain things in. They're tagged correctly. They're all connected. Of course, he's got a lot of history of building his system out, and that's why it's very efficient, because a lot of this is built in. But hope that answers the question. Anything
Seemed
else?
like a good answer to me.
You know what? Thanks everybody who's hung out with. I thought this would go a lot faster, and we would just sort of like plow through a few of the basic functionality. But hey, we've been hanging out for a little while. So
good. More questions than you realized.
We've got a couple examples going on here. Anything else, I suppose, or we can wrap it. Last chance, last call.
Bill said don't go. Wait, but Bill said he was about to go to the pub.
Oh, Bill. Good for you, buddy. That sounds great.
Transom wants to know how you got those cool colors on your UI. Which ones?
What do you mean?
I don't know. Your checkboxes are orange, maybe?
I don't know.
Well, it's okay.
But thank you for thinking they're cool.
So do you use like when you're so most of the time, most of your sketchuping is woodworking stuff, right? Do you
My
do
personal, yeah.
much with yeah, so do you do much with scenes whenever you're working on just on like modeling up a project just for your own sort of hobby-based stuff?
I think we crashed SketchUp.
Ooh, neat. Auto close feature. Wow.
Nice.
Whoa, did it crack? Oh, that's just opening your bug splat. So you're still streaming, right?
Yeah.
That's fun. It's a little peek behind the curtain. You're like the Wizard of Oz.
That is a good sign that we're done. But what was your
Yeah.
question? Or we can be done.
If you like, do you ever use scenes? Do you use scenes much just for your own, like when you're working on your woodworking projects?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and certainly for this, anybody who uses SketchUp after a while can see the value in the utilitarian working scenes, even if you just simply, even if you just want to be like, I want to toggle between textured view and a simple line view. It's a good way. The other thing, let me see if I can. Uh, I'm gonna get in trouble showing this.
For
So
who?
because I don't want to go into this in depth. Um, I will start fumbling around, and I think this is worth maybe doing another session on, but I don't want to get into it crazy here. This is just the idea that you create. So I've got these are views which I have set up in layout. So I've got this is kind of a template in SketchUp. And again, so you're asking about my woodworking. If I want to create some plans for something that's a little more complex than just sort of printing out a few images, then I have, so back, front, exploded. I have all this set up so that I can send this to layout, or I have a layout file that has all of these set up on various pages, and I just swap the model out and it pre-populates stuff into layout. Now I have to go into layout and do some tweaking, and this is not a novel concept. Again, this is something that if you use layout, you know you can build in some efficiency this way. But that's another way where if you really want to dive into scenes, you can associate scenes not only between SketchUp models, but you can create templates between your SketchUp models and your layout files that can build in some efficiency. But mostly, I suppose the simple answer is, yeah, just a few working things to toggle styles or reference images on and off.
It's purely pragmatism driving your usage in that case.
Yeah, mostly. I mean, they're not big enough models that you really need.
What's that frame you're using there? The little, I don't know, kind of looks like a golden ratio setup.
It is, and these are on a layer that gets hidden. Layer tag. They're on a tag.
Ooh.
Layout squares. These get hidden. They're just a way for me to say, okay, here I'll put the model. Over here I'll put my exploded view. Over here I might put a different exploded view. But it's just a reference to say I need to put it exactly here because that camera view correlates to my saved view in layout. That's all that is. And sometimes I've got a lot more of them, but so it's just a reference both for size and for
It's
just
always
where to put the
it's always
model.
interesting to see how someone else is using stuff like that.
Yeah. I'm still tweaking this setup. Sometimes it works better than others. I don't know. I think if no other questions have come in, I think we're good, buddy.
I think so. I think there's Vasanth is trying to ask a question here, but he's got very specific asks, so I'm not quite sure where to go with that. He wants help on how to create a scene. He said he's got a small room. The room is 10 feet by 13 by 10 feet.
Okay.
But I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure what the issue he's running into is, or what he needs help with. So.
Well, just in case, you probably know this, but just in case. If you are doing any sort of interior view, change your field of view. Again, maybe you know that.
That's what Johnny was just saying as well, was wide angle camera, seeing with the wide angle camera.
And you can change your field of view with the zoom tool. If you activate the zoom tool, then you can just type something in down here. So I could say 60, and that's going to be even wider field of view, or 70, and now we're getting into like fisheye lens, super wide. The default of SketchUp is 35, and that's really not that great for interior. So if nothing else, and there is a field of view tool. It's just, but you can just use the zoom tool. So click on the zoom tool. It'll say field of view. Change it to at least 50 degrees or something like that, and then you can be situated in here and have a bit of a wider view to look inside. That may not be what you were asking, but 50.
Well, I think that's the best answer for.
50 something. So. All right. Should we call it? Jody. Okay. I lost connection. So if anybody is still out there hearing this, I'm sorry about that, but thank you for joining us. Hopefully, if nobody is hearing this, then Jody is wrapping us up. That's really weird. I apologize for that. We may have had just like a really abrupt ending. Just in case, though, I'm going to throw in our outro. Thanks again for joining us. Do let us know what you'd like to see in the future. And have yourself a great week.